The backyard was a vision of pastel perfection. Pink and white balloons danced in the gentle breeze beneath a crisp white tent. Laughter and cheerful chatter filled the air, all for my sister Amber's baby shower. I stood near the gift table, my heart pounding as I watched her unwrap my present. It was a handmade baby quilt, every stitch sewn with love over many late nights. Amber held it up with a polite, confused smile. My mother, Victoria, peered at it over her champagne flute. "Oh, Lauren?" she sighed, a familiar disappointment in her voice. "You couldn't have bought the stroller from the registry?" A wave of heat rushed to my face. My aunt chuckled softly. My mother's eyes swept over me, from my simple dress to my practical shoes. "You'll understand the importance of real gifts," she said, her voice carrying, "when you have something to show for yourself." The awkward silence felt louder than the laughter. I managed a tight smile, my heart shattering into 1,000 pieces. I turned and slipped away from the crowd, my hand already digging in my purse for my car keys. The leather seat of my car was hot from the summer sun. I slumped into it, the first hot tears finally escaping and tracing paths through my makeup. The humiliation burned deeper than the anger. Something to show for myself. Her words echoed, each repetition another cut. I pulled out my phone, needing a distraction from the crushing weight of my mother's judgment. That's when I saw it. A single missed call, from just 10 minutes ago. The name on the screen made my breath catch. Dr. Evans. Dr. Alicia Evans was the head of the Innovation Board at Crestwood Medical Center, the most prestigious hospital in the state. I had submitted a proposal to her months ago, a long-shot dream I'd almost given up on. My thumb hovered over the callback button. I looked back at the pastel tent, at the silhouettes of my family. A new, steely feeling began to replace the hurt. I wiped my tears away, my jaw setting. "They'll regret every word," I whispered to the quiet car, the promise solidifying in my heart. Sitting there, memories flooded back. Growing up in the Morgan household was a study in contrasts. Amber, with her golden curls and winning smile, was our mother's sun. She won beauty pageants, had a line of boyfriends, and now had the perfect husband, Jared, and a baby on the way. I was the quiet one, the practical child. My good grades were a footnote. My science fair trophies collected dust in my room while Amber's pageant sashes were displayed in the living room. Mom's praise for me was always backhanded. "It's good you have your books, Lauren. Not everyone can be the pretty one." I remembered my dad pulling me aside once after a particularly harsh comparison. He'd squeezed my hand and said, "Don't you worry, kiddo. One day, she'll see what you're worth." I see it. His belief had been my shield. But he'd been gone for 5 years now, and without him, the constant criticism felt endless. I eventually drove home, the knot in my stomach tightening with every mile. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. It was Amber. "Hey, Lauren," she said, her voice light. "Thanks for the quilt. It's sweet. Look, don't let Mom get to you, okay? You know how she is." It was the same half-hearted apology I'd heard my whole life. An hour later, my mother called. "Are you still sulking?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "You need to learn not to be so sensitive, dear. I only want what's best for you." The fury I'd felt in the car returned, white-hot and clean. I ended the call quickly, my hands trembling not from sadness but from a simmering rage. Needing a distraction, I opened my laptop, and there it was, an email from Dr. Evans's office. The subject line was simple, "Invitation to discuss your proposal." I clicked it open, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a formal invitation for a meeting with the hospital's full innovation board. My home office was my sanctuary, though to anyone else, it would look like organized chaos. Sketches and schematics were taped to the walls. A small 3D printer hummed quietly in the corner, next to a delicate prototype made of polished plastic and tiny sensors. This was my life's work, the thing I had nothing to show for. I was developing the Lullaby Valve, a low-cost, simple-to-use device to prevent respiratory failure in premature infants. The idea was born from a personal tragedy. Amber had lost her first baby, a little girl born too early, to a respiratory complication. The pain in our family had been immense. While everyone else grieved, I had channeled my sorrow into this. For years, I'd spent my evenings and weekends researching, designing, and building. I'd faced rejection from investors who said it was too niche, too simple. But I persisted. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface of the prototype. "I'm almost there," I whispered into the quiet room, the hospital's invitation feeling like a lifeline. The conference room at Crestwood Medical was all glass and gleaming wood. Dr. Evans and her board listened intently as I presented the lullaby valve. I explained how it could save countless lives in resource-limited hospitals. They were impressed, their nods encouraging. "This is brilliant work, Miss Morgan," Dr. Evans said. "However, before we can discuss funding in a partnership, we need to see proof of patent ownership. We must ensure the intellectual property is secure." My blood ran cold. I had filed the provisional patent paperwork, but the final submission was still processing. I thanked them and left, my head spinning. As I packed my things in the lobby, a familiar voice stopped me. It was Mr. Abrams, my old biology teacher, who now consulted at the hospital. He pulled me aside, his face concerned. "Lauren, be careful," he murmured. "I've heard whispers. Someone else has been asking questions about neonatal respiratory devices, sniffing around your idea." My heart dropped. Who could it be? The following Sunday, my mother insisted on a family brunch. I went, hoping to seem normal. Amber was glowing, one hand resting on her baby bump. "Jared's new consulting job is going so well," she announced to the table. "He's working with that big hospital group downtown. It's such a prestigious position." I froze, a piece of toast halfway to my mouth. "Which hospital group?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, you know, the big one," Amber said dismissively. "Crestwood Medical. He's on some innovation team. He says it's very cutting edge." The world seemed to tilt. Crestwood Medical. The innovation team. The pieces clicked into place with a terrifying clarity. The someone sniffing around my idea was connected to my own family. I looked at Jared, who gave me a bland, smiling nod. The food on my plate turned to ash in my mouth. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was scrolling through my emails when a new message popped up. The sender was blocked, but the subject line read, "Urgent. Check Patent Office records." Attached was a screenshot from the National Intellectual Property Database. My breath hitched. There, listed under the name Jared Walsh, was a patent application for a neonatal respiratory stabilization apparatus. The schematics were different, more polished, but the core mechanism, the genius of it, it was mine. It was the lullaby valve. A sob caught in my throat. He hadn't just been sniffing around. He had stolen it. He had taken my years of work, my passion, my promise to that lost niece, and claimed it as his own. My phone buzzed with another text. It was from my mother. "Just saw Amber and Jared. Be proud of your sister's family. They're really going places." The irony was a physical blow. I couldn't stay silent. I drove to their house, the printed patent application crumpled in my fist. Jared answered the door, his smile fading when he saw my face. "How could you?" I demanded, thrusting the papers at him. He scanned them, and to my horror, he smirked. "Lauren, come on. This is a complicated field. You never had the resources or the connections to make this happen. I'm just helping get this technology to the world faster. It's for the greater good." His arrogance was breathtaking. Just then, my mother's car pulled up. She hurried over, having likely been called by Amber. "What's all this shouting?" she asked. When I explained, her face hardened. She looked from Jared's smug expression to my tear-streaked one and sided with him, as always. "Lauren, you can't patent an idea about helping babies," she said dismissively. "It's called motherhood. Now, apologize to Jared for causing a scene." The days that followed were a blur of gray despair. I called the patent office, but the process to challenge a filing was long and complex. I couldn't focus at my day job. Sleep became a stranger. The walls of my apartment felt like they were closing in. The betrayal from Jared was one thing, but my mother's active participation in it was a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. I felt utterly defeated. One night, I pulled a small, worn notebook from my bedside drawer. It was my father's. I traced the faded ink of his handwriting. On one page, he had written, in his firm script, a piece of advice he'd given me often. "Don't fight loud. Win quiet." I'd always thought it meant to be passive. But now, staring at those words, I saw a different meaning. It wasn't about giving up. It was about strategy. It was about playing the long game and securing a victory so complete there would be no doubt who had won. I reached out to an old friend from college, Nina Flores. We'd lost touch, but I knew she'd become a lawyer. I poured the whole story out to her over coffee. She listened, her expression growing grimmer by the minute. "This is intellectual theft, plain and simple," she said firmly. But we can fight it. Do you have proof you created it first? I took her to my home office. I showed her everything. The digital timestamps on my original computer-aided design files, the dated entries in my research notebooks, the receipts for the prototype materials going back years. I even had a cloud-stored video of the first successful test from over 18 months ago. Nina's eyes lit up. This is perfect, Lauren. This is a rock-solid chain of custody. He may have filed first, but you invented first. The long game begins now. With Nina as my guide, I began methodically building my case. I created a detailed timeline, linking every email, every sketch, every purchase receipt to the development of the lullaby valve. I was calm, focused, my earlier despair replaced by a cold, determined resolve. Amber noticed my distance. You've been so quiet, Lauren, she said during one of our strained phone calls. Are you still upset about the baby shower? I gave a non-committal answer, but I could hear the suspicion in her voice. The most crucial break came when Mr. Abrams, my old mentor, agreed to testify confidentially about the early conversations we'd had about my project, long before Jared ever started at the hospital. We had our insider. The storm was gathering, and Jared was blissfully unaware, standing directly in its path. My phone rang from an unknown number. A woman's voice, sharp and professional, introduced herself as Simone Klein, an investigative journalist for the city's biggest newspaper. Miss Morgan, I've received a tip from a source within the medical community about a potentially stolen invention at Crestwood Medical, she said. Your name came up as the possible original creator. Can you comment? My heart leaped into my throat. I followed Nina's advice. I'm aware of the situation, but on the advice of counsel, I cannot comment at this time, I said, my voice steady. Simone was quiet for a moment. I understand. I'm pursuing this story either way. When the truth breaks, she warned, you'll want to be ready. I hung up, my hands trembling. The wheels were now in motion, and I was no longer the one pushing them. My mother hosted a family dinner a week later, a celebration of Jared's recent accomplishments. I decided to go. I wore a simple black dress and a calm expression. The air was thick with their self-congratulation. Jared held court, talking about the exciting launch of his project. My mother beamed, raising her glass. To family, she announced, her eyes lingering on Amber and Jared. And to those who make us truly proud. Everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine slowly, meeting my mother's gaze across the table. A small, knowing smile touched my lips. Oh, Mom, I said, just loud enough for her to hear. You have no idea what's coming. Her smile faltered for a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion, before she quickly recovered and looked away. Crestwood Medical held a press conference to announce the groundbreaking new device developed by their own Jared Walsh. I watched the live stream from my couch, a bowl of uneaten popcorn on my lap. There was Jared, standing at a podium, my invention displayed on a screen behind him. He spoke about his vision and his dedication to helping the most vulnerable. Then he looked directly into the camera, his face a mask of fake sincerity. And I was inspired by my own family. He said, and the miracle of new life. The gut punch was so physical I gasped. He was using Amber's pregnancy, the memory of the niece we lost, to sell his lie. As he finished his speech to a round of applause, I picked up my phone and called Nina. File it, I said, my voice cold. Within the hour, a formal notice of patent dispute was delivered to Jared and the hospital's legal team. It was the front-page headline of the Sunday edition of the newspaper. Hospital consultant accused of stealing medical invention from family member. Simone Klein's article was thorough. It named Jared, detailed the lullaby valve, and heavily implied I was the wronged creator, though I was quoted as declining to comment. The shockwave was immediate. My phone exploded with notifications. Friends, extended family, even people I hadn't spoken to in years were calling and texting. Amber sent a string of frantic, angry messages. My mother called, her voice shrill. Lauren, what have you done? You've ruined this family. You need to call that reporter and tell her it's all a misunderstanding. I listened to her voicemail, then silenced my phone. I stayed silent, just as my father had taught me. The truth was louder than my voice could ever be. The consequences were swift and severe. Crestwood Medical suspended Jared pending a full investigation. The story was picked up by national news outlets. Amber's perfect life crumbled. Her social circle, built on Jared's success, evaporated overnight. My mother showed up at my door, her face pale and drawn. "You have to fix this, Lauren," she demanded, her voice trembling. "This is a family embarrassment. Tell them you made a mistake." I stood in the doorway, blocking her entrance. I looked her directly in the eye, my own gaze steady and cold. I repeated her own cruel words back to her, the ones from the baby shower. "This time, Mom," I said slowly, "you'll understand when you have something to show for yourself." The color drained from her face. She stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time, before turning and walking away without another word. With Jared's project in disarray, the hospital's ethics board launched an emergency review of my original proposal and evidence. During this process, a preemie at a nearby hospital took a sudden turn for the worse. In a desperate, last-ditch effort, a doctor familiar with the case used my original functional prototype, the one Jared had called a useless hobby. It worked. The lullaby valve stabilized the infant, saving her life. The successful trial was the final piece of proof everyone needed. The hospital board called me personally to apologize and offer to reinstate the project. As I hung up the phone, a profound sense of peace washed over me. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about the baby who was alive. For the first time since he died, I felt my father's pride as clearly as if he were in the room. That evening, I received an email from a National Health Foundation. They wanted to discuss mass-producing the lullaby valve for hospitals nationwide. Amber came to see me. The glowing, pregnant woman from the baby shower was gone, replaced by someone pale and brittle with stress. "Did you do it?" she asked, her voice raw. "Did you leak the story to that reporter?" I didn't insult her by lying. "I didn't need to, Amber. The truth has a way of coming out on its own." "He ruined us," she whispered, collapsing onto my sofa. "The lawyers, the debt, everyone knows. How could he do this?" "He did it because he thought he could get away with it," I said softly, "and because everyone always let him." We were interrupted by a soft sound at the door. It was my mother. She had been standing in the hallway, listening. The look on her face was one I had never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but dawning, horrifying comprehension. "He told me it was his idea," my mother said, her voice small and broken. "He said you were just jealous, trying to take credit for his success. I wanted the best for all of you." I looked at this woman who had spent my life building up my sister and tearing me down. The anger I had carried for so long finally released its grip. "No, Mom," I said, not unkindly. "You wanted the best to look like Amber, a beautiful daughter, a successful son-in-law, a perfect grandbaby. You never cared what it actually was, as long as it looked good from the outside." It was the truest thing I had ever said to her. She didn't argue. She just sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping as the full weight of her actions crashed down on her. Amber watched, her own betrayal by Jared, now mirrored by her realization of our mother's shallow values. She stood up and walked out without a word, leaving my mother and me in a heavy, silent room. The official offer from Crestwood Medical arrived on crisp letterhead. They apologized profusely for the grievous error and the toxic environment Jared had created. They formally offered me a lead position heading the Lullaby Valve project with full creative control, a significant budget, and a share of the profits. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. It was vindication. Yet, as I held the letter, I felt a pang of hesitation. My entire life, my mother's approval had been the prize I could never win. Now that I had the ultimate symbol of success in my hands, I wondered if it would ever be enough to finally make her proud of me, the quiet, practical daughter. I decided to do one television interview with Simone Klein. I sat under the bright lights and told my story. I spoke about the years of work, the inspiration from my niece, the sting of betrayal, but I focused on the hope the Lullaby Valve represented. "This journey taught me that resilience isn't about being the loudest in the room," I said, looking into the camera. "It's about staying true to your purpose, even when no one else can see it." For that lesson, I suppose I have my difficult family to thank. It was a graceful, generous statement, and it made me look strong, not bitter. At home, my mother watched the broadcast alone. A hidden camera in my mind's eye showed her sitting on the edge of her sofa, her hand over her mouth, silent tears streaming down her face as she finally saw the daughter she had always overlooked. The legal and personal fallout for my family was absolute. Jared was formally charged with intellectual property theft and fraud. His career in medicine was over. Amber, heartbroken and humiliated, filed for divorce. She moved out of their big house and into a small apartment. My mother, the social queen of her circle, found herself a pariah. Her friends, who had laughed at me at the baby shower, now whispered about her. The invitations stopped coming. She became a recluse, trapped in her quiet, perfect house with the ghosts of her poor choices. Meanwhile, my life was beginning. Amidst the flurry of my new work, I received an envelope in the mail. It was an invitation to a baby shower. Not Amber's, but for a friend from my support group for preemie families. The baby shower was small and held in a sunny community center room. There were no perfect tents or matching balloons, just genuine happiness. Amber was there, helping the hostess. She was quieter, more thoughtful. When she saw me, she came over. "I'm so sorry, Lauren," she said, and for the first time I heard no hesitation, no excuse in her voice. "For everything. The baby shower, not standing up for you, for not seeing you." I accepted her apology with a nod, feeling the old wound begin to finally heal. As we were talking, the door opened. My mother stood there, looking frail and older. She hesitated, then walked straight towards me. "Lauren," she said, her voice soft and pleading. "Can we talk? Alone?" We found a quiet corner. My mother twisted her hands, unable to meet my eyes at first. "I was wrong," she began, the words seeming to cost her great effort. "All these years I thought success looked like Amber. A beautiful home, a handsome husband, a picture-perfect life." She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with a regret so deep it was painful to see. "Turns out," she whispered, a single tear escaping, "it looks like you. It looks like quiet strength and a brilliant mind that changes the world." I am so ashamed. I didn't hug her. The hurt was too deep for that. But I placed my hand over hers. "I forgive you, Mom," I said. And I meant it. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me, to set myself free. I walked out of the room, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a woman who had claimed her own power. Funny thing about having something to show for yourself. It was never about showing anyone at all.